All right. Oh, well, hello. This is my first technical actual live video. So I'm just having a play around with that technology and learning about the live, but I also want to have a look at this idea of this subsidies for new electric cars and other clean cars, which I think is a little bit odd. So I've been running a submission for that. And I'm going to email that in, on Monday or something. And so I thought what I would do is use this video as a way to go through um, my idea for what the thing should be, and before I send it, so that way I can kind of like work on it and sort of think about it and make a video about it at the same time. So yeah, a little bit odd, not my normal way of working, but I just thought I'd try something new. Uh, so the um so in New Zealand, actually I should check my audio quality because I think it's noisy. There we go there. Okay, so I had a play around and I've heard a little bit of my audio quality and it sounds like it's okay, so I'm gonna just continue on with that and see how it goes. Okay, um, just wait for the sample of audio to come around. It takes about 20 seconds or so for the audio that I create to go out on the live stream, so um, it's interesting to hear myself back. Okay, great. Okay, so here we go. So today I was so so on the Ministry of Transport webpage, which is here, so you should better see that in my video there. There is a, hang on, I'm just going to bring up another window so I can check this live. There we go. Good. Okay. You need a lot of screens for doing YouTube live. You need about to see what you're talking about and whether what you're doing live is going out and whether it's framed properly. So it's a little bit weird. Okay, so here we go. If you go to this webpage, which is transport.gov.nz, they have a lot of information about new things. So here's the thing about drones and civil aviation, so all kinds of transport stuff, which is controlled by the government, is here, and you can see some statistics about New Zealand driving. 53,000 kilometres of roads and 223 people have been killed in car accidents this year. Public transport usage is in there, and electric vehicle fleet. So at the moment we've got 15,000 cars, and so what the government is trying to do is it's trying to increase the number of electric cars, and so to do this they have this discussion document, and just so that you can understand the discussion document, a friend of mine had a copy of it at work, and so this is it. If I just show you on my camera, there's like a it's like if anybody remembers an old school telephone directory, there's about half a ream of paper in this document. So it's got a lot of analysis about how many cars there are in New Zealand and how they're used and all of this kind of stuff. All these cool graphs. There's just heaps of stuff going on in this. And then they came out with this thing this clean car standard, which is an idea to get people to use clean cars, and in it they have all the kinds of different electric cars that you're about to buy in the market coming up. So that's in that. But the there's a survey online which closes on Tuesday, which allows you to give your personal feedback on this. But the way that the questions are asked, in my opinion, I feel as if it actually channels people into, it makes people, so here's the things in the green boxes are the things that they specifically ask questions about in the survey. And what it does is it tends to in my opinion, when I was going through it, it tends to channel you into a certain way of thinking about it. And my objection is that it tries to move you to this like a presupposed position, which, I guess the idea of this discussion statement by the people who wrote it is to get people to think about this idea in a particular way, which is not something that I'm entirely fond of working that way. It's not my way, because when I thought about writing a submission, I was just going to write a submission totally based on my own thoughts. And so, although I completed the survey, which counts as a type of submission, I've also written my own submission too. So what I'm going to do is put on the screen my document as far as it is so far. I don't know, it's not quite close. Maybe it's close to the end document that I would want to say about it. But it's just it's just how I see it. And so I'll just, maybe it's worthwhile to show you what the survey looks like if I can work out how to find it on this web page. I did find it before I opened a window which had it in it. Let's have a look. I have your say on clean cars. Where did it go? There we go. Oh yeah, online survey. So if you go through this, transport.gov.nz website, you can do this online survey. And so when you open the survey up, what it does is it gets you to I've already taken this. So once you've taken the survey, you can't even look at it again. It's quite odd. So when I was doing the survey, I went through and made notes of what the survey questions are. So I'll try and give you some idea. In some places, I noted what the questions were. Yeah, it asks you a lot of specific things. Some of the things are real specific, like how should people be punished if they make fraudulent claims under the system and stuff like that. And that's like it arduously weighs you down in detail and kind of tires you out before you actually get up to the bit that you might care about, which for me is how people would actually have their cars subsidized if you're going to subsidize them. And the answer is, I don't think they should really subsidize cars. That's my opinion. So anyway, I'll show you the document that I wrote. So the original idea of the document is that they is it where's the thing? I don't know where it is. They tell you about how we should put an extra charge. So when you buy a car, you pay extra if you buy a very pollutive car, and if you buy a very efficient car like an electric car, you get a subsidy, and the money comes from the people who paid on the pollutive cars, and that's fine. But what I actually think is that the number of cars that electric car manufacturers can make each year is actually currently limited. So by subsidizing cars, all you're doing is taking money off people to spend on electric cars, but it doesn't make there be more electric cars. So anyway, here's just I made a document of my position. So firstly, I started with a personal statement. I have a Bachelor of Science. I did computer science, but general science. I also studied environmental physics as part of my science degree, so I know a little bit about how the energy flows in the water, in the air, around the planet, and also I've been studying that in my own time, sort of geosystems. I've been studying that independently anyway. Oh, this is, sorry, I just realized that the document, that personal statement is under my video camera thing. I'll make the video view smaller. There we go, so that it's not overlapping my document. Perfect. There we go. So, and maybe if I how do you change the view? There we go. Change that to 100. There we go. Now it'll be able to be read by anybody looking at the video, even if they're looking on a small screen. So I have a Bachelor of Science. I've studied environmental physics a little bit. I worked at Met Service, which is the national weather company in New Zealand, and I also spent a year selling electric vehicles to New Zealanders, predominantly used vehicles, which are predominantly imported from Japan and a few from the UK. The idea of the Clean Car Initiative, the Clean Car Standard, and Clean Car Subsidy is to reduce New Zealand's CO2 emissions in line with international agreements. I think there's some agreements like Kyoto Protocol, stuff like that. It's not really important about what those agreements are, just that we've made agreements and we have to reduce our CO2 like every other country does. But I think there's a flaw with the way that they propose the subsidy, and that is that they just propose to subsidise the initial purchase of the vehicles, but it's independent of how the vehicles are used, which I think is a mistake. There's supply side constraint in the electric vehicle market, which means that there can't, just because people want there to be more electric cars, it doesn't magically make there be more, because in order for there to be more, there needs to be the infrastructure in place to make more. And so the largest lacking feature is that there aren't enough car battery factories to make the batteries for electric cars in the world. There might not even be enough resources to make sufficient batteries in the world. But people are very smart and they're always good at working out new ways to make things. So if the demand for electric vehicles is there, or the supply is there, then the supply of batteries should hopefully catch up to demand, and then electric cars will start reducing much more quickly in price and come to price parity with petrol cars. Some people think currently that for small electric cars, like just a 4 or 5 seater general little city car that people run around car, they could come to price parity rather quickly, maybe within 5 years even, in which case I don't know if we really need vehicle subsidies, because if you had the choice of buying a small Toyota car, and I'm talking about very lightweight little 4-seater car, maybe 5-seater car, Toyota Yaris, Vitz, or Eco, depending on what market you're in. These little cars, they're the kinds of cars that everybody can use, or many people can use for just everyday use for driving around in cities, and then larger electric vehicles that you use for highway driving between cities, which is what most people in New Zealand do, because a lot of people in New Zealand drive between cities a lot, and there's some people aren't comfortable with driving very small cars between cities because they kind of perceive it as dangerous, and that's fair enough. If you don't like a car, you're not going to buy it. Doesn't matter how awesome it is. If it's just not something that you feel comfortable with, you won't buy it and use it anyway. So I think the supply side is constrained, which in economics means that because there's not enough supply, if you increase the demand for vehicles, it only increases the price. And most people might think, like, is it possible that prices of cars are increasing? And what I saw in my year of working in electric vehicles is the prices in many cases for certain categories of cars didn't go down, they went up. So I've had an electric car for more than 2 years, and I could probably sell it for the price that I bought it for 2 years ago. So it hasn't gone down in price at all, even though I've driven it an additional 40,000 kilometers, which means that indicates a supply constrained market to me. I mean, that's one point, but if you look at cars that are convenient, can drive 150 to 250 kilometer range, I don't think there's sort of like that's a good value car for a lot of people, and they're happy to buy it, and they're happy to pay as much for it now as they were a year or two ago. So that's interesting. And another one where the supply constraint is electric vans. In the time that I worked in electric cars, electric vans almost doubled in price in New Zealand. So you could buy a second-hand Nissan electric van, which could drive about 100 kilometers on a charge. Those were as cheap as $18,000, and then I saw some as expensive as $36,000. Granted, it's not exactly the same fit van, whether it's a cargo van or a passenger van or a minibus van. Um, the 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 basic cargo vans went from about $18,000 up to about $30,000 or $28,000. So they're not. So that's again is supply constraint. So if the supply is constrained and the demand's going up, that means that you can sell them for a higher price. So anybody who currently has one, they'd be silly if they sold it for a lower price because you could make money on it. Also, I don't talk about hydrogen vehicles because hydrogen vehicles, in my opinion, are not going to be a thing because they don't have economically viable physics. So it's physics constrained. You can't make it be anything other than what you want if it's physics constrained. So hydrogen vehicles are just, in my opinion, don't need to be discussed. Um, and then I'm talking about only vehicles below 3,500 kilograms, which is the normal cars you can drive on normal car licenses. But I'd also include electric motorcycles if I was making a system, because if you're going to be systematic, you may as well include everything. Um, and then um, the idea is that the money to pay for the subsidies would come by charging extra polluter vehicles extra money. So if you were buying a big four-wheel drive and it was particularly inefficient compared with other four-wheel drives, then that would get a higher surcharge put on it. So basically, vehicles coming into the New Zealand market, imported used or new vehicles, would be surcharged if they were very inefficient or very inefficient compared with other similar styles of vehicle. So they're looking at adding, I think it was about $2,500 or $3,000 onto the price of a very inefficient vehicle. Um, I disagree with the way that the subsidy would be applied by making the buy price of a vehicle cheaper. I don't think that because the supply is constrained, giving a discount actually only means that more money goes to the sellers of the car or the manufacturers of the car. So that actually doesn't make there be more cars. And to get less emissions, you need for there to be more cars, and you need for the cars that are made to be driven more than other cars. That's how you get your advantage. And then further, we currently have this thing called road user charges in New Zealand, which is where you pay per 10,000 kilometres you drive. So if you have a vehicle that's diesel powered or electric powered, at the moment there's a RUC exemption for electric powered cars, but not for diesel powered cars. You don't pay tax on your fuel or electricity because you can't, the way that diesel and electricity is sold. Instead, what you do is you pay for 10,000 kilometer segments or whatever. I think it can be different amounts, but for 10,000 kilometers, it's normally I think $6,400. So it's like $6.40 per 100 kilometers. So if you drive 100 k's every day on an electric car in New Zealand, if you charge it at home, you'll spend about $4 on electricity and $6.40 on road user charges. But at the moment, the road user charges are exempt on all electric cars. So, like anybody who owns an electric car at the moment, they're extraordinarily cheap to drive. But at the moment, RUC charges come on, they will jump to being about the same price per kilometre to drive as a diesel vehicle, or maybe less because electricity is still cheaper than diesel. But if you have to buy your electricity from a commercial provider, say you're fast charging your car, then an electric car will cost more than a diesel car to drive if you include RUC. So at the moment, everybody who's got an electric car is currently being subsidised for RUC. And so the other thing is, I see no way around it. I think that petrol cars are just, or fossil fueled cars, or all cars in general, electric cars too, are going to continue to get more expensive to drive, just because of the way we're using resources in the world. Um, um, all kinds of vehicles are inefficient compared with walking or riding a bike or taking public transport. So the cost of using a private vehicle will kind of only just go up over time, just in general. Could from time to time get cheaper. Um, I think that's limited by physics, so I'm not trying to fix that. And I don't discriminate against older, cheap electric cars or new, fancy, expensive electric cars. I'm going to apply the same percentage subsidy to every kind of car. So um, in the current proposal, that proposal there in that big document, um, basically any car that costs over $80,000, you don't get a subsidy. They just didn't want to give rich people who can afford expensive cars subsidies, and that's fine. I don't think that rich people should be given stuff for free for no reason. Um, if you can afford $100,000 car, then it just doesn't. You don't need a subsidy. But on the other hand, it also excludes really cheap cars, used. It includes used cars if they're less than 3 years old, but less than 3 years old, that's not a, that's not a cheap car. That's still a, moderate price car, especially the way the electric cars are priced. Probably my car is just over 3 years old now, but I bought it when it was about 6 to 9 months old, so I would have got the subsidy if it existed at the time. But my car was quite cheap, so a cheapish subsidy on a cheapest car doesn't, percentage-wise, it's not that great. Whatever, doesn't matter. And then, oh yeah, about 80% of all electricity in New Zealand comes from renewable hydro, wind, and geothermal, and the other 20% is from gas and coal. And in the South Island, it's almost 100% renewable. And also in New Zealand, the average New Zealand car drives about 40 kilometers per day, about 15,000 k's per year. I think it's 14,500 k's per year. Okay, so that's my preamble. Hope you're enjoying my video. It's a pretty dry topic, and well, people are watching. Oh, louder. Oh, sorry. I've now seen that somebody's asked some comments there. Level is low. Um, let's have a look. I'll try and tune it. This is the first real live I've done, so I've upped my audio to basically maximum. So I'll just see if I can. Let's try that. Does that do anything? We'll try that. Okay. Anyway, I'll just keep going on. Oh, thanks for commenting, Andrew. Hi, Andrew. You're the first person who has watched my live. Great. And then, yeah. So, as I was saying, I think vehicles are supply constrained. I'm just getting text messages. Okay. Anyway, let's see. Where was I? Oh yeah, supply constraints. Yeah. So in my opinion, they're not making enough batteries. They're not producing enough. So giving money to them doesn't make them make more batteries, because the supply of batteries is constrained. Therefore, the supply of vehicles is constrained, and the tiny amount of money that New Zealand can give into the international market for cars won't make any pragmatic difference. So, that's crazy for us to do that. That's just a transfer of money offshore from New Zealand, which actually won't make any benefit. So that doesn't help. because the goal of the subsidy is to benefit the environment and the planet. If you're just buying cars into New Zealand by offering a subsidy, getting cars from somewhere else, that means that you're only moving cars from another country to here, which doesn't net improve the emissions on the planet because the environment goes over the whole planet. So um, although it might make our contribution to Kyoto Protocol or whatever any international agreements, while that might make it better, um, that won't actually improve the emissions on the planet. So it makes no sense to do that. Um, and so the way going to have to mute my phone because it's just getting annoying. Um, the 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 Yeah, so the way that you maximize efficiency with a constrained supply of electric vehicles is to have the electric vehicles which are in existence used much more, so they replace the use of other petrol or diesel vehicles, which means that you get those emission savings. And especially in a country like New Zealand, that helps because our electricity is mostly renewable. And so I've got an example. If you could only afford a few LED lights for your house, then what you should do is you put those LED lights in the rooms that you use the most at night time, so like your living room and your hallway and your kitchen, because that means that you get the best efficiency out of those lights. Um, and and so that's how you get the most benefit out of all efficient things. So whenever you change to something new efficient, you have to use the new efficient thing more than you use the old inefficient thing for that to actually be a net benefit. Um, and so what I say is we have to we have to change the cars that are used all day, every day in New Zealand first, so that they become the most used cars, replacing the usage of older inefficient cars. And so the way you do that is to get taxi drivers and delivery van drivers to be the first people to have the electric vehicles. And then failing that, you want the cars that are just driven long distances. So you want the people who drive long commutes to have the vehicles first. And so what I propose is to continue with the current project that they've got on, which is discounts for road user charges, because you buy your road user charges per kilometre of driving or per 10,000 kilometres of driving. And by having a subsidy, so that if you've got two cars, say you're a 2 or 3 car family, and you go, oh, I want to drive somewhere, and you've got the choice of taking your old diesel car or your hybrid car, and you've got the choice of taking your electric car, it will be a no-brainer to take the electric car because you won't have to pay RUC if you take the electric, whereas you'll have to pay RUC if you road user charges if you take your diesel, and if you drive your petrol car, your hybrid, well, road user charges are built into the petrol that the vehicle burns when you buy it, so that's why petrol costs more than diesel in New Zealand, significantly more. It's about, I don't know, 30–40% more because the road user tax is built into the petrol. And that's because mostly petrol's just used for driving normal cars on normal roads, whereas diesel's used for heavy vehicles and other special vehicles, and that's why they couldn't include road user charges, because those things might not be used on the road, or if they are used on the road, they're heavy vehicles, so they cause more damage to the roads, so more road user charges are used to repair the roads. So that's how that makes that fair. And so I think that in time, diesel and petrol, as that runs out, it will get more expensive, but also our government can increase the taxes, which they do on petrol and diesel anyway, to try and phase out the use and push people to more efficient cars in every way. So even if you move to a hybrid car, because petrol's getting more expensive, that's still a net benefit. And so the way I'd implement it is to while there aren't that many cars in New Zealand, so I chose 5%. While there's less than 5%, then 100% of the RUC on your electric car gets covered. And then when it increases, like say when there's 10% of electric vehicles in the fleet, then it covers a certain percentage of your RUC. And so as the number of electric cars in New Zealand's fleet increases, the RUC prices will slowly go up until they have parity with diesel RUC prices, and that kind of makes that fair. And if electricity electricity is always cheaper than diesel anyway, so there'll always be an advantage of buying an electric vehicle over a diesel vehicle. Um, but what this avoids is a kind of a, a ruck shock, because the people who are currently like me who own an electric car don't pay ruck at all. If it suddenly goes from nothing to, you know, $6.40 per 100 kilometers, then that triples the cost of using my car if I charge at home. So that won't be fun when the RUC exemption ends. Um, so um, I drive a lot of Ks per year, about 20,000 Ks. So this would be an advantage to me. But I didn't just design the project to be an advantage to me. I think about it because I think about it. So therefore, it should make a submission, is what I was thinking. Um, so so I basically designed a system to um, to be the biggest advantage to people who drive a lot, taxi drivers, delivery drivers, people who have long commutes, because that's where you get your biggest emissions reduction. And so I, I would just retain the system of the discounted RUC until a certain percentage of cars are all electric, and it just slowly blends in. If you get to the point where half of the cars in our fleet are electric, it's not because people are still buying petrol cars. It's just that the petrol cars that exist and the diesel cars that exist will have to be economically used until they're worn out, or until they're converted to be electric, if that ever happens. So I'd even include in my system that the benefit would even go to people who say you got a car and you could convert it to electric. Maybe somebody can work out a way to turn hybrid cars into purely electric cars. If that's the case, then, and if your car is old and it becomes electric, it would get covered by RUC, and therefore if the RUC discount's still operating, you'd get a discount, which would be a benefit. So that benefits everybody. So that the idea is to give as much benefit to people who drive their cars the most, so that would make our emissions go down quicker. So I would just guess, I haven't done maths on this, I would guess that my system would just logically makes more sense, makes more sense to me, rather than just giving people a discount when they buy a car, because you get that problem that if you give discounts to people when they buy a car, but then they don't drive it much, then it doesn't give you much benefit, because you went through all of the emissions that were, emissions from building an electric car when the car's first built is somewhat higher than just making a petrol car. So you've got all the upfront emissions without any of the savings. So it doesn't make sense. The whole proposed idea just doesn't make sense. That's proposed in this discussion document. It's silly. I think it's odd. Um, the other thing is that I think that hybrids and super efficient petrol cars are just good petrol cars, and I just don't think they should get a subsidy. And then plug-in hybrids or range extended vehicles, they should get a subsidy, and the subsidy should be something related to how far they can drive compared with 100 kilometers. So I think that you just set it, any car that can drive 100 kilometers on a single charge, even if it has a petrol generator, that will give you extra range if you needed it. Primarily, if you had it, you would just run it on electric mode, because it's just much cheaper to power a car with electricity than it is by petrol. So you wouldn't often ever use the petrol feature. Most people I know who own range extended i3s, I know about 3 people who have had them, they said that they almost never drive them in petrol mode, because it just doesn't make sense. It's cheaper to use electric wherever you can. And so there's only a few occasions where most people have ever really driven it in petrol mode, and when they did, they didn't drive it that far. The kind of funny ones, like a Prius plug-in, which a lot of them only do about 25 k's on a charge, and the other popular one is Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. They get about 40 or 50 k's on a charge. So maybe you get 50 k's if you're driving around town and 40 k's on the highway. So I'd give them some kind of partial RUC discount. Yeah, so put that in there. And the other thing is that New Zealand is not like other countries. We're not like Norway that has a huge sovereign wealth fund that can just pay for subsidies out of the sovereign wealth fund. I think Norway's sovereign wealth fund has something like 400,000 American dollars to somewhere near $1 million per person in the sovereign wealth fund, so we can't afford that. And we don't have, unlike Japan and UK and China and the USA, we don't have any car factories in New Zealand. So in the countries like UK, Japan, China, USA, those new car subsidies go directly to the companies that are in there, and it gives people jobs. It's not a job program for us. It's offshoring of money to provide jobs in other countries. That doesn't benefit New Zealanders. So I think that's a silly way of doing subsidies. And the other thing, there are some other things that are good that New Zealand got right. We used a lot of we use some current subsidies for subsidising the charging infrastructure, which means that we've got a network right around the country. So almost any electric car can be driven right around New Zealand, and you always can find a place to plug it in. So as there, we've got 15,000 cars, about 200 fast charging stations. So that's, you do get a bit of fast charging station congestion. They keep building more charging stations, which is good, and we're basically keeping up with demand, which is great. Like I can drive my car. My car only drives 160 to 180 k's on a charge, but I can take a 400-kilometer trip without worrying, because there's basically a charger every 25 to 60 k's. So I can find some chargers, and sometimes if a charger is busy, I can skip to the next one, and so I'm not often inconvenienced by having to wait to charge. So that's great. But as there becomes more cars, there'll need to be more public charges. Um, yeah, so that's it, and that's the end of my document. So I'm going to email that into the government and get them to think about it in a different way, because I just don't think that the current system actually benefits people. Great. Anyway, so that was my. Hopefully that was good. And what did I got? I got 11 people or something, five concurrent viewers. So I'm pretty happy with that. So thanks everybody who's watched. I don't know if anyone's still watching. Um, if you're if you're still watching, then yeah, ask me any questions if you have any questions about that. I might just muck about with this a little bit and see what else I can find. Um, oh, so did anybody watch? Do you watch my YouTube videos at other times? I'm curious about that. And for anyone who's watching, was it Snow? Andrew said, my volume was a bit low, so tried to sort that out. I hope that sorted out as well. Again, if you want to do a submission, you can look at this yourself. I'll just bring the website up. So it's on transport.gov.nz. What is it? It's home multimodal climate change and energy, electric vehicles, clean cars. Where was it? So it was on I think that's the front. Yeah, that's the front page of the website there. And then where was it? It was consulting on clean cars. And there's the online survey there, so have a look at that. That's worth looking at. Thanks, No. And if you just want to write your own thing, which is what I'm doing, you can just email it to cleancars@transport.gov.nz. But that finishes on 20th of August, which is, not that many days away. Got 3 days. So yeah. Well, hope that was helpful and informative. That was my first actual practical live that I've ever done. So thanks for watching and listening. Um, I can just do some other things mucking about. So what I can adjust my video size, and I tried a thing where I used two microphones, but they're not, the audio is not synchronized. So I hope the audio from my headset was quite good. It's actually a wireless headset, but I plugged it in so that the battery wouldn't stop, because I have had little audio glitches with it, which I think are caused by when the battery starts to go um, get a bit flat. It seems like the packets coming on the radio transmitter don't synchronize properly, something like that. And I think I might try and improve lighting, because my actual camera video is quite dark. I muddled about with my lamp here, but when I did it like that, it was like super way too bright. So kind of just need a, yeah, it is tricky to do live video stuff. So yeah, and actually this little thing down here tells me about the quality of the video. So I actually had very little um, very little in terms of drop data, which is good. So I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, well anyway, I think I'm gonna end the stream, and then I might see if I can do an edited version to put on my YouTube channel. Okay, thanks for watching. Goodbye.